So a brother is told by his dad to go out and check on his other brothers. You guys have all done this before if you've had kids. You tell your kids to go check on each other to make sure everything's okay. But this is a little different situation. This brother's a little older. He's 17. And his brothers, the brothers he's going to check on, are actually a little bit older than him. They're in their 20s and 30s. But they're a family, they're basically a family farm, a family ranch. And so the dad tells the brother to go check on the other brothers. He heads on out to do it because he's normally used to doing these types of things. He's a good kid. He's very responsible. But that also causes a problem. You see, this brother is kind of a family favorite, and everybody knows it. Dad has said, because of the bad family dynamics, that this is his favorite son, at least of the ones that are there. And so he sends this brother out. The brother shows up. He's got a new jacket on. He's got taken care of. And when he gets out to see his brothers, they're angry. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm actually talking about the book of Genesis, and I'm talking about a guy named Joseph and his brothers. Joseph is a man who, as a 17-year-old kid, has had a lot going for him. He actually had a dream at one point in time that he was going to be kind of over everybody, and that his brothers and his parents and everybody was going to bow down before him. Not an awesome dream to tell everybody else about, because you can imagine how well that went down. But his brothers couldn't stand him. When he shows up to find his brothers out here working with the sheep, they see him and they come up with a plan. And this is the part that blows my mind. They come up with this plan, and here's the plan. They're like, we should do something with him. Let's grab him. So they take their brother, and they grab him before he knows what's going on. There's 10 of them, right? So there's not a lot he can do. And they throw him down in a hole. And while he's down in this hole, something happens that will scar you. As he's laying in this hole, he hears his brothers up above, and he hears some of them say this: I think we should kill him. I think we should kill him. If we kill him, we can do this. We can take that nice jacket of his that Dad got for him. We can take that jacket, we can tear it up. We can put some blood on it from an animal and tell Dad that he got killed. And nobody will know any better for it. There's no FBI, right? There's no Galilee Police Department that's going to investigate this thing. And so he hears this, and as he's laying here inside this hole, he starts pleading for his life, and then they say, you know what? Let's not kill him. You know what we should do? We should sell him. We could sell him into slavery. Here comes some Bedouins right now. They're coming down the road. We can sell him into slavery, and then we're not losing out. You see, if we kill him, we don't make any money. But if we kill him, we get some cash. I mean, if we sell him, we get some cash. And so they decide in that moment, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. He didn't know this at the time. They didn't know this at the time. But this was going to be the last time that they were going to be together for a long time. And in their minds, this was going to be the last time they'd ever see him again. And they were going to be better off for it. So they drag him up out of the hole. They pull him out of this hole. And they sell him to the people coming down the road. To picture camels, Bedouins traveling to Egypt. And the last time he saw his brothers, he was probably tied to the back of the camel as he's walking the 250 or so miles in the desert to Egypt. How would that mess you up? How badly would that mess you up? If your family, the people you're supposed to trust, the people you're supposed to expect to take care of you, betray you that way. And I say this knowing full well that there are men and women in this room who have baggage that is maybe not like that, but just as heavy in their hearts. Family baggage is super hard. And last week, as Brandon talked about this guy Joseph, he talked about this story, and it was a precursor to what happened with Joseph in the first half of the rest of his life. You see, what Brandon talked about last week with Joseph was how he was faithful, and how after this he got sold into a home, and he was accused of doing things with the wife, of trying to take advantage of the wife of the guy that owned the home, and instead he was thrown, because of that, he was thrown into prison. But God blessed that, and ultimately God blessed him and allowed him to be faithful, and he was put in a position by the end of this where he was over Egypt, second in command over all of Egypt. And Joseph was very faithful in all of these things. And we listened to this story last week, and many of us think, well, that's fantastic. Joseph seems like a really cool guy. I'm amazed at the fact that he could be faithful after all of these things had happened to him. But it's different when it's your family. Today we're going to look at something that's harder. We're going to be looking at Joseph and how he re-interacts with the family that has sold him into slavery. One of the craziest stories that you're ever going to deal with, but I think it's one of the most important stories that we can ever deal with. Today we're going to finish up the book of Genesis. And in this passage we're going to look at today, we're actually going to look at a few different passages. What we're going to see today is how Joseph reintegrates with these brothers that sold him into slavery, that took his jacket, they cut it all up, they tore it up, they put sheep blood on it, they brought it back to Dad. They said, your son has been killed. So Dad assumes that his son is dead. How they have sold him off. We're going to see actually today how the brothers deal with this fact later on in life and how it affects them as well. But what I want to ask you to do today, as we study through the end of Genesis, is I want to ask you to, and this is uncomfortable, this is hard, I know this as a person with baggage, to look at the example that Joseph sets, to look at the way that he chooses to walk with his brothers when things are brought back to the fore as he sees them again. I want to look at this story, and I want to ask you to see God's faithfulness even in what is in the moment next to impossible to believe it's a faithful time. I want to ask you to do this because I want to show you something today. I want to show you that God is faithful, can be faithful in the hardest of situations. But before we get there, I need you to understand something about Joseph. Joseph isn't this way just because he's awesome and just because he's great. Joseph is this way because he had an interaction with God. We didn't focus on this as much last week as we probably could have, but we need to see this today because it affects everything else that happens with Joseph. You see, Joseph has this dream that I've just brought up, this dream that the brothers look at and say was a terrible thing. And I understand why they would. But for Joseph, this dream, this time with God, this thing was so convicting that he truly believed that God had a plan for the rest of his life. If you've had an interaction with God, a real interaction with God, it changes you. He knew this dream was from God, and it changed the way that it saw the world. And so with that, I want you to understand something. What Joseph does today is going to be completely guided by the fact that he knew that God was in the middle of it, and it changed the way he saw things. And I want to ask you, because of that, as you're looking at your story, even for some of us who have terrible stories, to understand that God is faithful enough to use the worst and still make it something that is usable and redeemable in this broken world. We're going to pick up in Genesis 45 today. So if you have your Bibles, turn there. In Genesis 45, we're going to look at Genesis 45, and then we're going to skip to Genesis 50. And in Genesis 45, Joseph has been interacting with his brothers. They don't know who he is. All they know is they're talking to this guy that is second command over all of Egypt. They're there in front of their brother because they're hungry. This famine that has hit all of Egypt and all of that area of the Middle East has affected them. They're starving, and they heard that there was food in Egypt. When they got there, they met this man, and this man was, kind of cruel to them. They didn't understand why he was so cruel to them, but they understood that they were foreigners, and he sent them home. He held on to one of the brothers. It's a wild story, but what we're going to see today is the first time Joseph shows himself as his brother to his brothers. We're going to see this interaction that could be very cruel, that it would be totally understandable if it was very cruel. But what we're going to see today is because God's in the middle of this, healing can happen where it seems like there should be no healing. So picking up in Genesis chapter 45, we're going to look at verse 1 through 8. I'm going to read this with you. It'll be on the screen. And if you have your Bibles, let's read along together. Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you! Out, all of you!" So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and he wept. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. "Please, come closer," he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset, and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine has ravaged this land for 2 years, and will last 5 more years. And there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of Egypt. Now, you can understand here, as they sit there, it says that they sat there and they were afraid, they were in disbelief. You can understand why they would be a little bit afraid, right? You can understand why they might be a little bit scared. Any of you guys ever done something to somebody that you knew you probably shouldn't have done? Anybody in this room ever messed somebody else over? Or is it just me, right? Like, I have said things that I know I shouldn't have said. I've done things that I know I shouldn't have done, and I have lived with the fear of, if I ever run into that person, anything that person gives me, I'm going to deserve. Joseph is standing in front of his brothers. Joseph is second in command over all of Egypt. Joseph is powerful, and the last time that they saw him, it says, was when he was 17. That has now been at least 22 years. So he's pushing 40. They're in their 50s. They see this guy. They don't recognize him because it's been a long time. If you're like me, I've run into people that I graduated from high school with that I can't recognize today because we look so different. But they see this guy, and he's dressed up in Egyptian robes, and when he says, I am Joseph, there's shock and there's confusion. He says, come closer. I need you to see this. I need you to hear me. I need you to hear the fact that we're speaking the same language, and I'm speaking with the same accent. I am your brother, and they are scared. They're scared because they know this guy has the power to kill them if he wants to. He has the power to do anything to him that he wants because he has the power of the entire government behind him. But Joseph says something here that blows my mind. Joseph says, it wasn't you who did this, it was God. How can he say that? Joseph's encounter with God when he was 16, 17 years old in this dream, this encounter with God, this meeting with God, changed the way that he saw the world. It changed the way that he saw the world because he understood, really understood, that there is someone who is bigger than me, that's bigger than my plans. He is bigger than how I understand the world to be. And if he is faithful in this, and he has shown himself to be faithful, then I have no answer but to trust that he knew what he was doing, even in the heartbreak that we've all experienced over the last 20-something years. I was listening to a guy talk this week as I was, my family took a drive to Arizona. Beautiful. Glad to be home. But we took this drive, and as we were driving back, I was listening to a preacher talk. And as he was talking, he said something. If you were to come up to me, Tom, and say, hey, I just got hit by a train. All right? I just got hit by a train. And I'm having a hard time. I'm sorry I was late. I got hit by a train. And I looked at you, and I was like, he still has all his teeth. His clothes don't look pretty torn up. He's walking. He still looks stronger than me. So this is Tom. He's looking good. I'm going to look at you and say, Tom, I don't think you got hit by a train. I think you're making it up. Because you don't look like you're any worse for wear. You don't look changed. If you get hit by a train, the train changes you in certain ways. When people say they have an encounter with God, he changes them. He changes them. Changes the way that we see the world. In fact, we are, as if you're a follower of Jesus, you're saying, I had an encounter with the God of the universe. He sent his son to die for me. He died for my sins. He took away the guilt and the things that I carried for myself. He has changed me, and that's why I can go through this world. And I don't have to have bitterness, and I don't have to have envy, and I don't have to have heartache in the same way, because I trust that my future is guided by him. It's not guided by me. He has changed me. And if I look at you, it's not that I can judge whether you're saved or not, but But if I look at you and I say, you don't look like you've been hit by a train, if your life doesn't look any different today than it did 25 years ago before you came to know Jesus, or you said you did you? Not trying to throw people under the bus. This preacher was talking. I'm listening to this guy talk, and I'm like, that hits home to me. How can Joseph forgive his brothers? Because he has seen over the time that God knew what he was doing, and that ultimately today, many lives are going to be saved because of this thing that his brothers did that was evil. Joseph's encounter with God changed the way that Joseph saw the world. Right? It changed the way that he saw the world. It changed it in a way that was fascinating because he was able to see a bigger picture than just what's happening to me. I know how easy it is for myself to get caught up in victimhood. As Brandon said last week, one of my favorite things to say is, we are not victims. We are more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. We're not victims. I say that because I need to hear it myself all the time. You can ask my wife on my own. I'm pretty darn whiny. And I come from a long line of darn whiny. But when you see somebody who has been changed by God, who has an encounter with God, who has had an encounter with the one who is from before the beginning, the one who has no beginning and no end, the one who says, I know tomorrow, the one who gave us the end of the book and shows that he wins, and because of that, we, if we are followers, we get to win as well. If we understand that, we're changed. Here's the problem. And this is why it's so surprising that Joseph doesn't do this. The problem is we have this thing inside us, and I think our society makes it really hard. This thing inside us that really makes us believe that we are the stars of our own movie. Right? That I am the star of the show, that everything that's going on around is all about me, and I am the star of this thing. What Joseph does right here is he says to his brothers, I want you to know something. Even though I'm second in command of all of Egypt, I'm not the star of the show. And even though I am second in command of all of Egypt, you guys are not the villains of the show. We are a small blip in a much bigger story. We are a small blip in a much bigger story, and it's not my story. It's the story of God taking broken humanity and saying, I have a better way. Taking this thing that we have broken, this creation that God made for us, that we have broken because of our selfishness and our bitterness and these things, and taking it and say, I've got a better way, and I'm going to take a people out of this, and I'm going to show them a better way, and they are going to be messengers of hope in a world that is broken. And if Jesus doesn't come back before I die, there will be a time 100 years from now where nobody's going to remember Jim Beukelman. But the fact that I got to share hope and show other people Jesus, and other people have come to Jesus because of the message that God has used me to be a part of and other people to be a part of, means that my life and my purpose will not have been wasted, but it will be a victory. And that is the hope that we have in the darkness that we are in. I hope that doesn't sound selfish, because I don't intend it to be. Joseph understood in this moment the bad stuff that had happened to him. God used it to ultimately save lives. We're going to see that here in a little bit as we go forward here. But I need to show you something as we go along with this. If you've got family baggage, you know the pain, because so much of that, and please don't, I'm not trying to belittle what has happened. But so much of that comes down to, I don't understand how those people could do this, and I'm sure Joseph had the same thoughts. But what Joseph didn't know was going on was what was happening inside them at the same time. You see, their own sin had affected them for years. I want to look at skipping forward to chapter 50. We're going to look at verse 14 through 18. And in this, we're going to see something. So Joseph said to his brothers in the passage we just read, look, God did this. It's okay. It's not your fault. I'm not going to hold this against you. It's okay. And his brothers, hearing this, you would think would be put at ease, but they're not. We get to chapter 50. Joseph's father has died. Jacob has died. He's the father of the brothers, and he has passed away. And they come to Joseph as soon as he has died, when he is mourning over his father and going through the process of mourning and burial. After that is done, the brothers come up to Joseph and they say this in chapter 50, starting in verse 14. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong that we did him, they said. So they sent this message to Joseph. Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong that they did you, for their sin is in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin. When Joseph received this message, he broke down and he wept, and then he looked at his brothers. Then his brothers came and threw themselves before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. So, as soon as Jacob died, the brothers were afraid. Okay, well, he's acted like he forgave us. But we all know there's no way anybody could really forgive for something like that. And so we're going to say, let's get a message. Let's say that God told us to tell him that he has to forgive. Now, we need to know something about Jacob. If you read the passage between 45 and 50, Jacob, the father, had no problem saying what was on his mind. So this is not something that the dad did. If he had wanted Joseph to forgive and he didn't believe he would have said it on his own. But instead what we see here is the brothers, because of their own fear and their lack of ability to trust, now find themselves throwing themselves at their brother's feet, saying, please forgive us. Please forgive us. We're your slaves. You can do with us what you want. Why would they believe that Joseph was going to kill them, even after he said he had forgiven them? When we have done things that aren't trustworthy, when we have done terrible things, it makes us really hard. It makes it really hard to trust that anybody else wouldn't do the same things that we would do. It makes it really hard for us to trust other people when we know in our own minds we would do some pretty terrible things. When I do marriage counseling, I've had couples in my office that were couples that got together because they had cheated on their spouses before, and now they were together, and they didn't trust each other either. The truth of the matter is, once we have those things, it makes it hard for us to trust that God can redeem any of it. What Joseph didn't understand was that his brothers had always carried around the guilt of what they had done. We see this actually back in chapter 42. In chapter 42, when they first show up to see this guy that's in charge, and he's kind of mean to them, listen to what the brothers say. Remember, this is at least 22 years later. Speaking amongst themselves, they said, clearly we are being punished because of what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why we're in this trouble. So as soon as things went south for them, 20-something years later, they start talking about the fact, you know why this is happening to us? Because of what we did to our brother way back when. Some of us can relate with that, where we truly believe the reason our life has never gotten any better is because of this thing that we did, and we don't deserve anything different. This is where the brothers were in this moment, and this is why they couldn't trust even now that their brother truly would forgive them, because they weren't the type of people that do that. And the weight of what they had done had carried around with them. Maybe you're in that boat where you know the things that you said and you can't unsay them now. Or the decisions that you've made that have put you in this place where you can't trust anybody. But what I want to show you in this moment today, and what Joseph is trying to show his brothers, is that God can take the worst, and still do something with it. I want you to see really as powerful as any passage in all of Genesis, as powerful as anything that is spoken by people in all of Genesis, the words that Joseph says in verse 19 through 21. But Joseph replied, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children." So he reassured them by speaking kindly with them. I actually really like the NASB, the New American Standard Version on this. I really like the way that this is translated. It says that you meant evil against me, but God has used it for good. I say that because what Joseph says is not sugarcoating what has happened. I don't want to sugarcoat what has happened, and Joseph doesn't. He doesn't say it doesn't matter. He doesn't say it really wasn't that big of a deal. He doesn't say it wasn't that important and it's not a big deal and don't worry about it, guys, it's going to be okay. He doesn't just let it go. What he does say, look, it was evil what you guys tried to do. But I wouldn't be standing here today if God hadn't redeemed it. This is painful. It's hard. But the truth of the matter is, because Joseph had this experience, he was able to look back and see how God had moved him even in the midst of all of the heartache, how God had moved him even in the midst of all of these things and put him in a place where he was finally able to be redeemed by it and redeem other people for it. And in that place where he was finally able to see that and say that to them, the power of the event of the past lost its authority over the life of Joseph and those brothers. You see, and this is the hard thing, for the brothers and for Joseph, that event on that day defined the rest of their lives until this point. For Joseph, because Joseph was able to be healed of this. It was something that he was able to look back on and say, look, what my brothers had tried to do, God ultimately redeemed that, and today I'm able to stand here as a strong man. I'm able to stand here as a man, and I'm able to help people because I know that God is faithful. For the brothers, it had guided them in guilt, it had torn at them, and it had ruined them. But this moment didn't have to define everything for them. And I am not at all unaware of the fact that I'm standing in a room with brothers and sisters in this room who have moments like that define everything that's happened afterwards. Incredibly evil, terrible moments. For some in this room, people have done things, had things done to them that should have never happened. Betrayed by the people that should have trusted them. They should have trusted. And for some of us in this room, those moments define everything that's happened since. I can't ask you simply to just walk away from it because I don't think that that's the biblical thing. The biblical thing involves stepping away from that place of judgment, the place of the judgment seat, and saying, I'm going to let God handle this. God who is bigger than me, I'm going to let him be the decider, but I am going to trust that he knows what he's doing with me, even in the midst of this heartache. But there are others in this room who have done things that they never should have done. And that moment has affected and defined them, or those moments have affected and defined them. What Joseph did in saying this to them, if you hear their words, it's really kind of interesting. They say, your God, the God of your father. Up until this time, they won't even put themselves in a place where they could accept that he was their God. In this passage today, we see God at the end of the book of Genesis unite a family that was so broken and bring some healing to something that was so broken. I don't know how that looks for each of us in here, and I don't know how that's even possible for each of us in here. And I'm not saying that we can see that God's just going to go heal what's already been broken tomorrow. But what I want to show you with this today, and what my hope is from this passage today, is what my bottom line is for this, that God can redeem every part of your story. That the worst things, that God can ultimately do something positive through so much of the negative. The truth is, none of us deserve the gift of grace that God has given us through Christ, but God has given us hope in the middle of this, and God can take the heartache and the brokenness and the bitterness, and he can use it for something good. There was a lady in Elk City where I first started in the ministry. Her name was Natalie, and Natalie was awesome. She was great. Natalie, though, had a deep wound in her life. When she was in high school, Natalie got pregnant and was convinced to go and get an abortion. So she went and got an abortion, and that abortion, she would have thought, would have made life easier for her. But it really affected the way that she saw the world after that. Natalie, after that, got married, had 3 more kids, and found herself with her kids struggling to love them because she thought, what kind of woman could love these kids because I'm the same woman who killed my first? Natalie carried this burden secretly and privately with her, with just her immediate family and no one else. And then God started to do something in her. She started to realize that God is the only one who can heal this. I can't pay for this. I have to trust God with this. And she did something crazy here. About 20 years ago, maybe a little more, she was at a women's retreat up at El Porvenir, actually up here in New Mexico. And while she was in this retreat, she got up in front of some ladies, the ladies at the retreat, and told this story about how she struggled to love her kids and struggled in this way. Can you imagine? She told this story, and she said, but I believe that God can bring healing, and I believe I'm not the only one in this room who's experienced this. And if you need to talk about this, if we need to talk this through, God redeeming this thing that is dark and evil, if we need to talk about this, come and talk with me. And after she was done, everybody sat in silence, and all the women got up and left, and she stood there by herself at the stage. She didn't leave. Something strange started to happen. One by one, women started to come back into the chapel. Started to come back in and share their stories about the same decision and the effect and the fact there had never been any hope for them because they knew what they had done and they couldn't get out of it. Couldn't go back and change it. But could it really be possible that God could take this darkness and bring healing? Natalie ended up starting a ministry for women who had made the same decisions and needed healing from God. God used the brokenness and the pain that had happened that she had brought and that had happened to her and used it to bring healing to other people. We don't understand how big God is. We don't understand how big God is, and it's hard for us to see sometimes. I don't want to promise you daisies and roses and things are going to be easy in this life, because they're not. I mean, they bring it up all the time. Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I'm so thankful he said it. I wish he would have said, in this world, now that you're following me, it's going to be pretty awesome. But that wouldn't have been the truth. The hope is down the road. The hope is down the road when things are going to be great in eternity. But the hope is also now, because everybody has struggles in this world. But if you are a follower of Jesus, you are the one who God brings comfort for now. Philippians chapter 1, verse 6 says this. Paul says this, and I am certain that God, who began a good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. Please understand, your story's not finished yet. Your story's not done. Your story may be very painful. You've had terrible things done to you, or maybe you've made terrible decisions, but God can still use you. If there's something that's happened that's the primary story of your life, if that is the primary story of your life, you'll never be able to heal. The change starts to happen when the primary story of your life is what God has done on a cross 2,000 years ago and inside you today. When that becomes the most important story, the other things get put in a place where they can be necessary and useful instead of so painful. So here's what I would like to ask you to do. I'd like to ask you with your head to if you're a believer, write down the ways that God has brought healing and purpose in the pains that you have experienced. Go back and look and say, I know that this happened, but God has brought healing in this way, or I know that I made this decision, but God has brought healing in this way. I know that these things are there, but God has used me to be able to do this because of that. I'm not asking you to, I'm not telling you it's your fault to struggle with what's happened, that you should just suck it up and get over it. But I'm asking for God to bring some healing. It means to allow God to show you how this doesn't have to be the primary story. And I don't think we have a slide for this, but with your heart, I want to ask you to pray over and remember the promises of God. God promises to redeem this, like Paul just said, that he is going to bring to completion what has been done. Paul tells us in Romans 8, verse 17 and 18, and since we are his children, we are his heirs. In fact, together with Christ, we are heirs in God's glory. But if we only share in his glory, we must also share in his suffering. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory that he will reveal to us later. The suffering of now, the suffering of the battle of now, is nothing compared to the good that God can bring through that and will bring through it ultimately when Jesus returns. And lastly, and here's the challenge. Tell someone about your encounter with God. If God has done something inside you, tell people it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. The more you talk about what God has done, the easier it is for you to be able to see what God has done as well. It's in those things, in those stories, our story becomes seated where it can be. Now, I know today has been hard, and in a moment we're going to take communion. If you would like to pray together, I'll be in the back to pray. We'll have some others ready to pray as well. But I want to ask in this time, as John comes forward here, to allow God to do something in us. And what I know has been a hard passage, but I think a vital one. So I want to pray over you guys. I'm going to pray with you. For God to bring us all some healing here, and then we're going to see what God can do. Our Lord and our God, I pray this morning for my brothers and sisters in this room. God, if you would start to ease and heal what seems unhealable. that you would use for good what has been intended for evil. We can't do that on our own, God. We can't. But I pray that you would do just that. Please, God. By your Holy Spirit, calm and ease our hearts with a hope from you. I ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.